Every parent's worst nightmare is watching their child wait for someone who will never come. In 1884, 6-year-old Rosalind sits alone at Cedar Falls train station, her mother's promise echoing in her heart as darkness falls across the Arizona desert. The evening train never arrives, and neither does her mother. When the townsfolk see a giant Apache warrior walking toward the station, they scatter in fear. But Nashota isn't there for violence. He's drawn by something he can't explain, a vision that connects this abandoned child to his own devastating loss. What happens when two broken souls find each other in the vast wilderness of the Old West? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extraordinary for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty platform of Cedar Falls Station as Rosalind clutched her faded cloth doll closer to her chest. The doll, with its carefully stitched smile and button eyes, had been her constant companion since her earliest memories. Her mother had made it from scraps of an old blue dress, working by candlelight in their cramped room above Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. "Mama will be back soon," Rosalind whispered to the doll, just as she had every day for the past week. The words felt hollow now, like echoes in an empty church. 3 weeks earlier, life had been different. Victoria Hartwell had been bustling around their small room, packing her few belongings into a worn leather satchel. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded each item with careful precision. "Listen to me, sweet girl," Victoria had said, kneeling before her daughter. "Mama has to go away for a little while, but I promise I'll come back for you. I'll send word when it's safe, and then we'll be together again. Do you understand?" Rosalind had nodded solemnly, though at 6 years old, she couldn't grasp what safe meant or why her mother's eyes held such fear. "Mrs. Henderson will look after you," Victoria continued, pressing a small brass key into Rosalind's palm. "This opens the box under my bed. If something happens to me, you give this to someone you trust, someone who will help you. Inside, there's enough money for a train ticket and a letter that explains everything." The child had wanted to ask so many questions, but something in her mother's voice warned her not to. Instead, she hugged her doll tighter and promised to be good. That had been 21 days ago. Mrs. Henderson had been kind at first, allowing Rosalind to stay in the room and wait. But as days turned into weeks, with no word from Victoria, the elderly boarding house keeper grew anxious. The room was needed for paying guests, and feeding an abandoned child was an expense she couldn't bear. "The girl's mother ain't coming back," Mrs. Henderson had told the town council just yesterday. "Been over 3 weeks now. Something's happened to her, mark my words. We need to decide what to do with the child." Mayor Cornelius Webb had stroked his grey beard thoughtfully. "Orphanage in Tucson, I suppose, though it's a hard journey for one so young." "Could send her to the workhouse in Phoenix," suggested Deputy Marshal Frank Burton. "They take children, put them to useful labor." "She's but 6 years old," protested Dr. William Thornton, the town's only physician. "Surely we can find a family here willing to take her in." "And who'd that be?" Burton shot back. "The Weatherbys already got 5 of their own. The Clarks lost their farm last season. Times are hard enough without taking on another mouth to feed." The debate had continued. And for another hour, but Rosalind had heard enough. She'd crept away from the boarding house window and returned to her vigil at the train station, praying her mother would appear before the men in suits decided her fate. Now, as the Arizona sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky, that hope was fading like morning mist. The station itself was little more than a wooden platform with a small waiting room and ticket office. A hand-painted sign reading Cedar Falls, population 347, hung crooked on one post. The telegraph wires hummed in the desert breeze, carrying messages to and from the outside world, but none of them brought news of Victoria Hartwell. Station Master Edgar Pruitt emerged from his office, his face grave as he approached the small figure on the bench. A telegraph message dangled from his weathered hand. "Miss Rosalind," he said gently, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." The child looked up at him with eyes too old for her years. "About Mama," Pruitt nodded slowly. "The train she was supposed to take from Phoenix, well, according to this wire, no Victoria Hartwell ever boarded it. In fact, there's no record of anyone by that name purchasing a ticket at all." Rosalind's grip tightened on her doll, but she promised. "Sometimes grown-ups make promises they can't keep, child. Doesn't mean they don't love us, just means, well, sometimes bad things happen." The sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Mayor Webb and Deputy Burton rode up to the platform, their faces set with official determination. "Time to go, young miss," Burton said, dismounting with a jangle of spurs. "We've arranged for you to travel with the next supply wagon to Tucson. The sisters at St. Mary's will take good care of you." "I'm waiting for Mama," Rosalind said quietly but firmly. "Your Mama ain't coming?" Webb replied, not unkindly but with the blunt honesty of a man accustomed to hard truths. "Best you understand that now." As the men discussed arrangements for her journey, none of them noticed the lone figure watching. From the ridge above town, Nashota had been there since dawn, drawn by the same inexplicable pull that had haunted his dreams for days. The Apache warrior stood nearly 7 feet tall, his weathered face marked by years of sun and sorrow. He wore simple buckskin clothing and moccasins, his long black hair streaked with silver and braided with leather cords. Around his neck hung a medicine pouch made from soft deer hide, containing sacred items and, most precious of all, a small braid of his daughter's hair. Nashota had lost his child, Ayala, during the forced relocation 5 years ago. The soldiers had come in winter, driving his people from their ancestral lands toward the reservation. Many had died during that terrible march, including his young daughter, who succumbed to fever and cold when she was barely older than the girl now sitting alone on the platform below. For years afterward, Nashota had lived as an exile, unable to bear the reservation where every sunrise reminded him of his loss. He had made his home in a hidden canyon 30 miles from any settlement, speaking to no one, trusting no one, nursing his grief like a sacred flame, until the visions began. 3 nights ago, he had dreamed of Ayala. She appeared to him as she had been in life, bright-eyed, curious, always asking questions about the world around her. In the dream, she pointed toward the east and spoke in their native tongue. "Father, there is a child who waits as I once waited. She needs what you could not give me." When Nashota woke, he found tears on his cheeks, the first he had shed since Ayala's death. The vision returned the following night, more vivid than before. This time, he saw the train station clearly, saw the small girl with the cloth doll, saw the fear and loneliness in her eyes. Ayala's voice came again, gentle but insistent. "She will heal the wound in your heart, Father, as you will heal the wound in hers. Go to her." On the 3rd night, the vision was so real he could smell the desert sage and hear the distant whistle of trains that never came. When he woke this time, Nashota knew he could no longer ignore the call. Now, watching the scene unfold below, he understood why his daughter's spirit had sent him here. The child was being abandoned by her own people, just as he felt abandoned by his. She sat alone, just as he had sat alone in his canyon for 5 long years. As the sun reached its zenith, Nashota began his descent toward Cedar Falls station. The townspeople saw him first. Mrs. Henderson, hanging laundry behind the boarding house, dropped her basket and ran inside, barring the door. The blacksmith, Samuel Torres, grabbed his rifle and called for his wife to get the children indoors. Word spread quickly through the settlement. An Apache was approaching. By the time Nashota reached the outskirts of town, the main street was deserted, except for Mayor Webb, Deputy Burton, and Station Master Pruitt, who stood in a tight group near the platform where Rosalind still sat with her doll. "That's far enough, Redskin," Burton called out, his hand resting on his pistol grip. "State your business or move along." Nashota ignored the deputy and continued walking at his measured pace. His eyes were fixed on the small figure who had yet to notice his approach. When he was 20 feet away, Rosalind finally looked up. Their eyes met across the dusty platform, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simply the understanding that shared by all wounded creatures. Nashota stopped walking and studied the child's face. In her features, he saw intelligence, courage, and a loneliness that matched his own. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt on the wooden planks and set down the small pack he carried. From it, he withdrew a piece of dried meat and a gourd filled with water. "You are hungry," he said in careful English, his voice deep and gentle despite his imposing size. "And thirsty?" The adults tensed, hands moving to weapons, but Nashota made no aggressive moves. He simply held out the food and water, waiting. Rosalind looked at the offering, then up at the giant man's face. She saw kindness there, beneath the weathered exterior and the marks of old pain. "Thank you," she whispered, accepting the meat and water with the politeness her mother had taught her. "What is your name, little one?" Rosalind Hartwell." Nashota nodded solemnly. "I am Nashota. It means he who comes like wind." "That's enough," Burton interrupted, stepping forward with his gun half drawn. "You've had your look, Apache. Now move along before there's trouble." Nashota rose to his full height, and though he made no threatening gesture, his presence commanded respect. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to leadership. "The child has no one. She's got people looking after her," Webb said nervously. "We're taking her to the sisters in Tucson, to be forgotten among other forgotten children." Nashota's gaze never left Rosalind. "This is not right. What happens to her ain't your concern," Burton snapped. "You best be on your way." For a long moment, Nashota stood silent, seeming to weigh some internal decision. When he spoke again, his words changed everything. "I will take her." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath. "Like hell you will," Burton snarled, fully drawing his weapon now. "No Apaches walking off with a white child. Not on my watch." Nashota's eyes fixed on the deputy with calm intensity. "You would rather send her away to strangers than allow her to be cared for by one who knows loss as she knows loss?" "You're talking crazy," Webb said, though his voice wavered. "The territorial authorities would never—" "The territorial authorities," Nashota interrupted, "did not come when she waited alone for 7 days. You did not come when she cried at night for her mother. No one came but me." Rosalind looked between the men, understanding that her future was being decided in these heated exchanges. The Apache's offer both frightened and comforted her. There was something in his voice, in the careful way he had approached her, that reminded her of how her mother used to speak when Rosalind woke from nightmares. "I ain't afraid of you, Redskin," Burton said, raising his pistol. "Walk away now, or I'll put you down." Nashota regarded the weapon with the same calm he might show a rattlesnake, acknowledging its danger, but not fearing it. "You will kill a man for offering kindness to a child who has none. I'll kill a savage for trying to kidnap a white girl. And if she stays, if she goes to your orphanage or workhouse, what kindness awaits her there?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, because everyone present knew the likely truth. Orphanages were overwhelmed and underfunded. Workhouses were little better than prisons for the poor. A child with no family connections, no money, no influence, would face a hard life indeed. Rosalind stood up suddenly, surprising all the adults. She tucked her doll carefully under one arm and walked over to where Nashota knelt. Without a word, she placed her small hand on his massive shoulder. "Will you really take care of me?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Nashota looked into her eyes and saw his daughter's spirit shining back at him. "Yes, little star, I give you my word. Then I'll go with you." Burton cursed and raised his gun higher, but Mayor Webb grabbed his arm. "Hold on, Frank. Think about this. If we force the issue, someone's likely to get killed. And then what? We still got a child with no home. and a lot of questions from the territorial marshal about why we shot an unarmed Apache who was trying to help. You can't be serious, Cornelius. Turn a white child over to a savage? That savage speaks better English than half our townspeople, Dr. Thornton observed quietly. He had approached during the standoff, drawn by the commotion, and from what I've seen, he's shown more concern for the girl's welfare than anyone else. Burton turned on the doctor. Whose side are you on, Doc? The child's side. Same as we all should be. Station Master Pruitt cleared his throat nervously. Begging your pardon, gentlemen, but there's precedent for this sort of arrangement. Knew a trapper up in Colorado, lost his wife and baby. Apache. Woman who'd lost her own child took him in, raised him proper. Turned out fine, last I heard. That's different, Burton protested. That was a man, not a little girl. A child is a child, Nashota said simply. They need food, shelter, safety, and someone to teach them the ways of the world. These things I can provide. Webb looked around at the faces of his fellow townspeople, reading the uncertainty in their expressions. None of them had volunteered to take Rosalind in. None of them had even visited her during her long vigil at the station. Now, here was someone offering to care for her, and they were refusing out of pure prejudice. If we allow this, Webb said slowly, it would be temporary, until we can locate her relatives or find a proper family to adopt her. Of course, Nashota agreed, though something in his eyes suggested he had no intention of giving up the child. Once he'd claimed her, Burton holstered his gun with obvious reluctance. And this is madness. When the territorial marshal hears about this, he'll hear that we acted in the best interests of an orphaned child, Webb interrupted firmly, which is exactly what we're doing. Nashota rose and extended his hand to Rosalind. Are you ready, little star? She nodded solemnly and took his massive hand in her tiny one. Together they walked toward the edge of town, where Nashota's horse waited patiently in the shade of a cottonwood tree. As they reached the magnificent Mustang, Nashota lifted Rosalind easily onto the horse's back, then swung up behind her. The she-animal, sensing its master's mood, stamped once and nickered softly. His name is Thunderwalker, Nashota told her. He will carry us safely. Rosalind patted the horse's neck tentatively. Where are we going? To find your mother, Nashota said simply, and until we do, to my home in the canyon, where you will be safe. As Thunderwalker carried them away from Cedar Falls, neither the Apache warrior nor the small girl looked back. Behind them, the townspeople watched in stunned silence, already beginning to wonder if they had made the right decision. But Nashota felt a lightness in his heart that he hadn't experienced in 5 years. For the first time since Ayala's death, he had someone to protect, someone to care for. The great emptiness in his spirit began to fill with purpose, and in his medicine pouch, next to his daughter's braid, the sacred items seemed to hum with approval. The spirits had spoken, and he had listened. Now began the true journey, not just across the desert landscape, but toward healing for 2 wounded souls who had found each other in their darkest hour. The ride to Nashota's hidden canyon took most of the afternoon, winding through rocky terrain that seemed impassable to untrained eyes. Rosalind clung to the saddle horn, amazed by how easily Thunderwalker navigated the treacherous path. Behind her, Nashota's steady presence provided comfort, his strong arm occasionally steadying her when the trail grew particularly rough. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they emerged into a secluded valley that took Rosalind's breath away. Steep canyon walls rose on 3 sides, their red sandstone faces carved into fantastic shapes by centuries of wind and water. A clear spring bubbled up from the rocks, creating a small stream that nourished cottonwoods and desert willows. Here and there, ancient Pueblo ruins dotted the higher ledges, testament to the generations who had found sanctuary in this place. This is beautiful, Rosalind whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Nashota guided Thunderwalker to a grove near the spring, where a simple shelter had been built against the canyon wall. It was constructed in the traditional Apache way, with a framework of poles covered by brush and animal hides. Nearby, a fire pit, surrounded by stones, showed signs of regular use. "This has been my home for 5 winters," Nashota said as he helped her down from the horse. "It is peaceful here. The spirits are strong." As if to emphasize his words, an eagle soared overhead, its cry echoing off the canyon walls. That first night, sitting by the campfire and sharing a simple meal of roasted rabbit and wild greens, Rosalind felt safer than she had since her mother's departure. Nashota was gentle but attentive, making sure she ate enough and stayed warm as the desert temperature dropped. "Tell me about your mother," he said as they watched the stars emerge in the clear sky. Rosalind hugged her cloth doll closer. "Her name is Victoria. She's very pretty, with yellow hair like mine. She sings when she works, and she tells the best stories." The child's voice grew quieter. "She was scared when she left. I could tell, even though she tried to hide it." Nashota nodded thoughtfully. "Fear makes people do things they would not normally do. Sometimes they must leave the ones they love to protect them. But she promised she'd come back, and she will try. But sometimes there are things stronger than promises, things that prevent us from doing what we want most." The wisdom in his words comforted Rosalind, even if she didn't fully understand them. She found herself growing drowsy as Nashota began to chant softly in his native tongue, a lullaby his own daughter had loved. 3 days passed in this peaceful routine. Nashota proved to be a patient teacher, showing Rosalind how to identify edible plants, how to read the signs that indicated water or weather changes, and how to move silently through the brush. In return, she told him stories her mother had shared and helped him practice his English by correcting his grammar with the gentle authority of a child who loved words. It was on the 4th morning that their sanctuary was shattered. Nashota woke before dawn, as was his custom, but something felt wrong. Thunderwalker was restless, his ears pricked toward the canyon entrance. The warrior's instincts, honed by years of survival, recognized the signs of approaching danger. "Rosalind," he whispered urgently, shaking the child awake. "We must be very quiet and very still. Men are coming." The little girl sat up quickly, instantly alert. Living with uncertainty had taught her to respond rapidly to adult warnings. The sound of horses' hooves on stone grew louder, accompanied by voices raised. In casual conversation, Nashota motioned for Rosalind to stay hidden behind the shelter while he crept to a position where he could observe the canyon entrance. 6 men rode into the valley, led by Deputy Burton. Behind him came Mayor Webb, Dr. Thornton, station master. Pruitt and 2 men Nashota didn't recognize, rough-looking individuals with the hard eyes of professional trackers. "Spread out," Burton ordered. "They're here somewhere. Apache can't resist a water source like this." One of the strangers, a lean man with a grizzled beard, dismounted near the spring. "Fresh tracks here, Deputy. Horse and footprints, maybe. 2 days old." Burton's face showed grim satisfaction. "Good. We'll end this nonsense today." Dr. Thornton looked uncomfortable. "Frank, maybe we should just talk to him. See how the girl's faring." "Talk?" Burton snorted. "Doc, that savage kidnapped a white child. There's only one way to handle this." "She went willingly," Webb pointed out, though his voice lacked conviction. "A 6-year-old can't give consent to nothing," Burton replied harshly. "Besides, we got word from Tucson yesterday. Territorial Marshal wants her brought in proper-like." The second stranger, a heavy-set man with cold eyes, spat tobacco juice on the ground. "Apaches probably already sold her to one of the Mexican slave traders. Happens all the time down near the border." Nashota's jaw tightened with fury at the implication, but he remained hidden. From his position, he could see Rosalind crouched behind the shelter, her cloth doll pressed against her chest. The search continued for nearly an hour, with the men exploring every corner of the canyon. It was only a matter of time before they found the concealed shelter. Nashota knew he had to act. Standing slowly, his hands visible and empty, he emerged from his hiding place. "I am here," he called out in a steady voice. "There is no need to search further." 6 rifles swung in his Direction immediately. Burton's face split in a triumphant grin. Well, well. The mighty Apache warrior caught like a rat in a hole. "Where's the girl?" demanded the grizzled tracker. "She is safe." "That ain't what I asked." Burton's finger caressed his trigger. "Where is she?" Nashota remained silent, his dark eyes moving from man to man, calculating distances and angles. Dr. Thornton urged his horse forward. "Nashota, please. We're not here to hurt anyone. The territorial authorities have questions about the child's legal status. They want to ensure she's being properly cared for, and you believe she was not? It's not about what we believe," Webb said uncomfortably. "It's about the law." "Your law," Nashota replied. "The same law that drove my people from their homes and allowed my daughter to die on a forced march in winter." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Even Burton seemed momentarily at a loss for words. It was then that Rosalind made her choice. Standing up from behind the shelter, she walked calmly toward the group of armed men, her head held high despite her fear. "I'm right here," she announced, "and Nashota didn't kidnap me. I chose to come with him." Burton swung his rifle toward her, then thought better of it. "Step away from the Apache, little girl. Come over here where it's safe." "I am safe," Rosalind replied with the simple conviction of childhood. "Nashota takes good care of me. He teaches me things, and he's helping me find my mama." The grizzled tracker laughed harshly. "Kid, your mama's probably dead in a ditch somewhere. This redskin's been filling your head with false hope." The cruel words hit Rosalind like a physical blow. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she didn't move. Away from Nashota's side. "That's enough," Dr. Thornton said sharply. "There's no need to be brutal. She needs to hear the truth, Doc. Living in a fantasy ain't helping nobody." Nashota took a step forward, his calm finally cracking. "You speak of truth. The truth is that you abandoned this child. The truth is that she sat alone for days while your people debated her fate like she was livestock. The truth is that I am the only one who came when she had no one." "Apache truth," Burton sneered. "Your kind's got a different notion of what's right." "My kind," Nashota's voice carried dangerous undertones. "My kind honors children. My kind would die before abandoning one in need." The tension was building toward violence when Station Master Pruitt cleared his throat nervously. "Gentlemen, I hate to interrupt, but I've got something here might interest you." He held up a yellow telegraph form. "Came in this morning just before we left town." All eyes turned to him. Burton gestured impatiently. "Well, what's it say?" Pruitt's face was grave as he read. "It's from the Phoenix Marshal's office. They found evidence of foul play regarding Victoria Hartwell's disappearance. Blood on her hotel room floor, signs of a struggle. They're treating it as a potential murder case now." The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the group. Rosalind went very still, her small hand finding Nashota's. "There's more," Pruitt continued reluctantly. "They're asking all law enforcement to keep watch for the girl. Seems there might be people who'd want to silence any witnesses to whatever happened to her mother." The implications sank in slowly. If Victoria Hartwell had been murdered, and if her killers knew about Rosalind, then the child might indeed be in danger, but not from Nashota. Burton's rifle wavered slightly. "That changes things." "How?" Webb asked. "If there's killers looking for her, maybe the Apache's Canyon ain't such a bad hiding place after all." Dr. Thornton nodded slowly. "Remote, defensible, and Nashota certainly knows how to survive in this country." The grizzled tracker spat again. "You're all loco if you think leaving a white girl with an Apache is the answer." "You got a better idea?" Burton challenged. "Take her back to town where any stranger can walk up and put a knife in her ribs." As the adults argued, Nashota knelt beside Rosalind. The little girl's face had gone pale with shock at the news about her mother. "She might be dead," Rosalind whispered, her voice breaking. "Might be," Nashota acknowledged gently. "But until we know for certain, we must hope, and we must keep you safe, as she would want." "You really think someone might try to hurt me?" Nashota's expression grew fierce. They would have to kill me first, little star. This I promise you." The simple declaration, spoken with such quiet intensity, seemed to settle the matter for Rosalind. She nodded and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mayor Webb had been listening to this exchange. Now he cleared his throat. "Nashota, if we were to allow Rosalind to remain in your care temporarily, what assurances could you give us regarding her safety and well-being?" The Apache warrior rose to his full height. "I give you my word as a warrior and a father. No harm will come to her while I draw breath. And if we need to contact you, if there's news about her mother, I will visit your town each week to check for messages. But Rosalind stays here where she is protected." Burton looked frustrated, but seemed to realize he'd been outmaneuvered by circumstances. "This is all against my better judgment." "Your judgment," observed Dr. Thornton dryly, "hasn't been particularly sound so far." As the men prepared to leave, Rosalind surprised them all by walking over to Mayor Webb. "Mr. Webb," she said politely, "will you put a notice in your newspaper?" "About my mama. Maybe someone saw what happened to her." Webb's expression softened. "Of course, child. We'll do everything we can to find out what happened." The group rode out of the canyon an hour later, leaving behind a transformed situation. What had begun as a rescue mission had become reluctant acceptance of an unusual arrangement. As the sound of hooves faded, Nashota and Rosalind stood together beside the spring, both understanding that everything had changed. The peaceful interlude was over. Now they faced an uncertain future, shadowed by violence and loss, but they would face it together. That night, as Rosalind slept curled up in the warm blankets Nashota had provided, the Apache warrior sat by the dying fire, his weathered face turned toward the stars. His medicine pouch felt warm against his chest, and he could swear he heard his daughter's voice in the desert wind. "You have done well, father. But the hardest part lies ahead." Nashota nodded grimly. He had found his purpose in protecting this lost child. But he knew that greater challenges awaited them both. The outside world would not leave them in peace for long, and somewhere in the darkness, unseen enemies might already be searching for the little girl who had witnessed too much. The following morning brought an unseasonably cool breeze that rustled the cottonwood leaves and sent small dust devils dancing across the canyon floor. Nashota woke to find Rosalind already sitting by the dead campfire, staring thoughtfully at her cloth doll. "You are awake early, little star," he observed, moving to rebuild the fire with practiced efficiency. "I couldn't sleep much," she admitted. "I keep thinking about what those men said, about Mama." Nashota struck flint to steel, sending sparks into the dry tinder. "Thinking is good, but thinking the same sad thoughts over and over is like walking in circles. It gets you nowhere." As the flames caught and began to grow, he settled beside her on a flat stone that served as their morning perch. "Tell me something happy about your mother," he said. "Something that makes you smile when you remember it." Rosalind considered this, unconsciously stroking her doll's faded dress. "She used to sing while she braided my hair, not real songs. Just made-up ones about whatever she was thinking. Once she sang about how my hair was like corn silk dancing in the wind, and how the ribbons were like little butterflies that got caught in it." A small smile touched her lips at the memory, and Nashota nodded approvingly. "Good. That is how you keep someone alive in your heart, by remembering the joy they brought you, not the sorrow they left behind." He moved to prepare their simple breakfast. But Rosalind's next words stopped him. "Did you do that? With your little girl?" The question hit Nashota like an arrow to the chest. For a moment, his careful composure faltered, and Rosalind saw the depth of pain he usually kept hidden. "For a long time," he said quietly, "I only remembered the end, the cold, the sickness, the way she called for me when I could not help her." He paused, his hands still. "But lately I remember other things. How she laughed when the young horses played, how she would bring me flowers and demand I wear them in my hair like a woman." Despite the sadness in his voice, Rosalind detected something else, a kind of peaceful acceptance that hadn't been there before. What was her name? Ayala. It means little bird in our language. That's pretty. I bet she would have liked playing with my doll. Yes, Nashota agreed, his voice warm with memory. She would have made clothes for it from scraps of hide and taught it Apache songs. As the sun climbed higher, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and red, Nashota began teaching Rosalind practical skills that might keep her alive in this harsh country. He showed her how to identify the prickly pear cactus pads that could be roasted for food, and the barrel cactus that held water in its flesh. The desert provides, he explained, but only for those who know how to ask properly. Thunderwalker, the magnificent Mustang who had brought them to this sanctuary, proved to be as patient a teacher as his master. The horse seemed to sense Rosalind's inexperience and stood perfectly still while Nashota showed her how to approach him, how to read his moods, and how to sit properly on his broad back. He was born free, Nashota told her as she tentatively patted the horse's neck. His mother was a wild mare who roamed these canyons. I found him as a colt, injured and alone after a mountain lion killed his mother. We healed together, he and I. Thunderwalker nickered softly and nuzzled Rosalind's small hand, as if accepting her into their small family. He understands loss too, she observed with the intuitive wisdom children sometimes display. Yes, perhaps that is why he accepts you. So quickly, their peaceful lesson was interrupted by the distant sound of riders approaching the canyon. Nashota's expression immediately grew alert, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. Into the shelter, he commanded quietly. Quickly, but do not run. Rosalind obeyed without question, scooping up her doll and moving swiftly to their hiding place. But these riders were different from the posse that had visited before. As they drew closer, Nashota recognized the distinctive patterns painted on their horses and the traditional clothing of his own people. 3 Apache warriors entered the canyon, their faces stern but not hostile. The leader, a man Nashota recognized as Geronimo's cousin, raised his hand in greeting. "Nashota," the leader called in their native tongue, "we would speak with you." Nashota emerged from behind the shelter, his posture respectful but wary. "Chato, you are far from the reservation. As are you, old friend. We come because of troubling news." The 2 men spoke in rapid Apache, while the other warriors remained mounted, their eyes scanning the canyon for signs of threat. Rosalind, hidden but listening, could tell from their tones that this was serious business. "The white authorities know you have taken the child," Chato explained. "They send word to all the Apache bands, asking us to help them find you." "And will you?" Chato's weathered face showed conflict. "The people are divided. Some say you are right to help the lost child. Others say you bring danger to all of us by defying the white man's law. What do you say?" "I say a warrior must follow his vision, even when others cannot see its wisdom." Chato paused, his expression growing more serious. "But I also say that men are coming from the territorial capital. Hard men with guns and no patience for Apache ways. They will not be turned away with words, as the townspeople were." Nashota nodded grimly. He had expected this. How much time? Perhaps a week, maybe less. They move slowly because they bring wagons and supplies for a long search. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Chato's companions occasionally adding information about troop movements and government intentions. Finally, the visiting warriors prepared to leave. "There is something else," Chato said as he mounted his horse. "The child's mother. Some say she is not dead as the white men believe." Nashota's attention sharpened instantly. "What have you heard?" Traders from the south speak of a yellow-haired woman held prisoner near the border. She was taken by men who work for the big mining companies. They use her to translate for Mexican workers, but she is watched always. How far south? 3 days hard ride to Bitter Creek, then another day to the border camps. The information hit Nashota like lightning. If Victoria Hartwell was alive and being held captive, it would explain her disappearance and the blood found in her hotel room. It would also mean that Rosalind still had hope of reuniting with her mother. After Chato and his companions departed, Nashota returned to find Rosalind sitting exactly where he had left her, though her eyes were bright with curiosity. "I couldn't understand the words," she said, "but they were talking about Mama, weren't they?" Nashota studied her small face, seeing intelligence and courage beyond her years. "Yes, there may be news. Good news. Is she alive? Perhaps. We will not know for certain until we search. Then we have to go find her." The simple determination in her voice reminded Nashota powerfully of his own daughter. Ayala had possessed that same unwavering certainty about right and wrong, that same refusal to accept defeat. "It will be dangerous," he warned. "The men who may have taken her are not kind, and there are others looking for us now, soldiers who will not listen to reason." Rosalind clutched her doll tighter, but her chin lifted with resolve. "Mama would come looking for me if I was lost. We have to try." As the sun reached its peak, Nashota began making preparations for departure. He gathered supplies, checked their weapons, and performed a brief ceremony at the small shrine he had built for Ayala. The sacred space consisted of stones arranged in a circle with prayer feathers and small offerings placed carefully within. "I ask for your protection, little daughter," he whispered in Apache. "Watch over us on this journey as you watched over me when I was lost." The prayer feathers stirred in a sudden breeze, as if stirred by invisible hands. That evening, as they shared what might be their last peaceful meal in the canyon, Nashota taught Rosalind some basic Apache words and phrases. She proved to be a quick learner, her young mind eager to absorb this new language. "Shijae," she practiced carefully. "Good, that means my father." "And what do I call myself?" "She, my daughter." The words hung between them, carrying weight. Beyond their literal meaning, in the growing darkness, illuminated by firelight, an Apache warrior and a white child had claimed each other as family. Thunderwalker stamped restlessly at the edge of the firelight, as if sensing the approaching change. Tomorrow, they would leave this sanctuary and venture into a world that wanted to tear them apart. But tonight, they were simply a father and daughter, bound together by choice and circumstance, preparing to face whatever trials awaited them. As Rosalind fell asleep, wrapped in warm blankets, Nashota sat watch beside the dying fire. His medicine pouch seemed to pulse with warmth against his chest, and he felt the presence of both daughters, one lost to death, one found in life, watching over him. The hardest part of their journey was about to begin. Dawn broke grey and cold over the canyon, with heavy clouds promising the rare desert rain. Nashota had been awake for hours, methodically packing their few possessions and preparing Thunderwalker for the long journey ahead. When Rosalind stirred from sleep, she found him kneeling beside the dying embers of their fire, his weathered hands working with precise movements. "What are you doing?" she asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Nashota held up a small object, a leather cord strung with turquoise beads and a tiny silver cross. "I am making something for you, for protection on our journey." As he worked, his fingers moved with the practiced skill of someone who had crafted many such items. The silver cross, he explained, had been given to his daughter by a Mexican trader years ago. She had treasured it, even though it represented the white man's god. "Ayala believed that all prayers reach the same sky," he said, placing the finished necklace around Rosalind's neck. "Whether spoken in Apache, Spanish, or English, they are heard by the spirits who watch over children." Rosalind touched the pendant reverently. "It's beautiful, but are you sure you want me to have something that was hers? She would want you to wear it. I am certain of this." As they shared a quick breakfast of dried meat and pine nut cakes, Nashota began preparing Rosalind for what lay ahead. He showed her how to secure her few possessions so they wouldn't be lost if they had to ride fast or hide quickly. Most importantly, he taught her how to sew her mother's locket securely inside the lining of her dress. "This locket may be the key to finding your mother," he explained as he carefully stitched the hidden pocket. "Keep it close, but keep it secret. Some secrets are worth more than gold to the right people." The locket itself was a delicate thing, no bigger than a child's palm, made of tarnished silver with an intricate floral pattern etched into its surface. Inside was a tiny photograph that showed Victoria Hartwell standing beside a man Rosalind didn't recognize, with what appeared to be mining equipment in the background. "Who is that man with Mama?" Rosalind had asked when they first discovered the hidden treasure. "Perhaps someone who can tell us where she is," Nashota had replied, "or someone who knows why she had to disappear." Now, as they prepared to leave their sanctuary, that photograph represented their only real clue to Victoria's whereabouts. The mining equipment visible in the background suggested a connection to Bitter Creek, the lawless town Chatto had mentioned. Thunderwalker seemed to sense the gravity of their departure. The great horse stood perfectly still as Nashota secured their supplies and helped Rosalind climb onto his back. When they rode out of the canyon, for what might be the last time, even the desert wind seemed to whisper farewell. The first day of travel took them through terrain that gradually changed from the red rock country around Nashota's canyon to the rougher, more desolate landscape that stretched toward the Mexican border. They rode carefully, keeping to washes and hidden valleys that offered concealment from anyone who might be tracking them. As the miles passed, Nashota shared more of his knowledge with Rosalind. He taught her how to read the desert's subtle signs, the way certain birds indicated water, how the behavior of small animals could warn of approaching weather, and how to identify the plants that could heal or harm. "The Apache way," he explained, "is to move with the land, not against it. We take only what we need and leave the rest for those who come after." Rosalind absorbed these lessons eagerly, her quick mind filing away each piece of information. But it was during a rest stop at midday that their growing bond truly deepened. They had taken shelter from the blazing sun in the shade of a rock overhang. When Rosalind began to tell Nashota about her life before her mother's disappearance, she spoke of the boarding house where they had lived, the other residents who had treated her kindly, and the small rituals that had made their cramped room feel like home. "Mama used to brush my hair every night," she said, unconsciously mimicking the motion with her hands. "She'd count the brush strokes out loud, always exactly 100. She said it would make my hair shine like sunshine." "And did it?" Nashota asked with gentle humor. "I think so. At least that's what she always told me." As the conversation continued, Rosalind found herself sharing deeper memories. Her fears about her father, whom she had never known. Her worries about growing up poor, and her dreams of someday having a real home with a garden and maybe a cat. In return, Nashota began to open his own heart. He told her about Ayala's love of storytelling, how she would gather the other children and spin elaborate tales about brave warriors and wise animals. He described the traditional ceremonies his daughter had participated in and the way her laughter could make even the sternest elder smile. "She was the light of our people," he said simply. "When she died, part of that light went out of the world. But maybe part of it came back," Rosalind suggested with the profound innocence of childhood. "Maybe that's why your visions told you to find me." The observation struck Nashota speechless for a moment. In all his grief and searching for meaning, he had never considered that his daughter's spirit might have guided him to Rosalind, not just to save the child, but to heal his own wounded heart. Their first real test came that afternoon when they encountered a group of hostile settlers who assumed the worst about an Apache traveling with a white child. 3 rough-looking men emerged from a desert camp, their hands resting on their weapons as they blocked the trail. "Hold on there, Apache," the leader called out, his voice thick with suspicion and whiskey. "What you doing with that little girl?" Nashota brought Thunderwalker to a stop, his posture calm but alert. "We travel peacefully. We mean no harm." "That ain't what I asked." The man stepped closer, his companions spreading out to flank them. "Where'd you get that child? She looks like she's been crying." Rosalind, frightened, but remembering Nashota's teachings about courage, sat straighter in the saddle. He's taking care of me, she said in a clear, strong voice. My mama's missing, and he's helping me find her. Is that so? The leader's tone suggested he didn't believe a word of it. Well, little missy, maybe you'd be safer coming with us. Can't trust no Apache with a white child. I trust him, Rosalind replied firmly. He saved me when nobody else would help. The simple declaration, spoken with such conviction by a 6-year-old girl, seemed to give the men pause, but their leader recovered quickly, his hand moving closer to his gun. Apache lies come easy as breathing. Kid's probably been threatened into saying that. It was then that Rosalind surprised everyone, including Nashota. Slipping down from Thunderwalker's back, she walked directly to the leader and looked up at him with fearless eyes. I know the difference between someone who wants to hurt me and someone who wants to protect me, she said. Nashota feeds me when I'm hungry, keeps me warm when I'm cold, and teaches me things that keep me safe. What have you done for me? The man's face reddened, but before he could respond, one of his companions tugged on his sleeve. Jake, maybe we should let them pass. Kid seems fine, and that Apache ain't showing no hostile signs. After a tense moment, the leader stepped aside. Get moving then, but if I hear reports of trouble involving you two, I'll be coming to find you. As they rode away, Nashota felt a surge of pride in his young companion. That was very brave, little star, but also very dangerous. Sometimes being brave and being dangerous are the same thing, Rosalind replied with wisdom beyond her years. That night, camped in a hidden wash miles from the confrontation, they sat by a small, smokeless fire and shared jerky and water from Nashota's gourd. The desert around them was alive with the sounds of night creatures, but Rosalind no longer found the darkness frightening. Nashota, she said quietly, when we find Mama, will you stay with us? The question touched the deepest part of his heart. Would you want me to? Yes, you're my family now too. Under the vast canopy of desert stars, an Apache warrior and a lost little girl had found something neither had expected, a love that transcended race, culture, and circumstance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new tests of their bond. But tonight, they were simply a father and daughter, united by choice, and sealed by the trials they had already overcome together. The town of Bitter Creek sprawled like a festering wound across the desert floor, its ramshackle buildings and muddy streets a testament to greed and desperation. Even from the ridge overlooking the settlement, Nashota and Rosalind could smell the acrid smoke from the smelters and hear the constant noise of machinery grinding ore into dust and profit. It's ugly, Rosalind whispered, unconsciously pressing closer to Nashota as they surveyed the scene below. Ugliness often hides truth. Nashota replied, his keen eyes studying the layout of streets and buildings. We must look beyond what appears on the surface. They had been traveling for 3 days since leaving the canyon, following increasingly rough terrain as they moved toward the border country. The landscape here was harsh even by desert standards, a maze of arroyos, alkali flats, and jagged hills that seemed to reject human habitation. Yet Bitter Creek had taken root in this desolation, sustained by the silver ore that men died to extract from the earth. As they watched, a stagecoach rumbled into town, its wheels throwing up clouds of dust that settled on everything like a curse. Men emerged from saloons and gambling halls to see what news or opportunities the coach might bring, their faces hard with the kind of desperation that comes from too many broken dreams. We cannot enter openly, Nashota decided. Too many eyes, or too many questions. We must find another way to learn what we need to know. That evening, they made camp in a hidden draw several miles from town, where a small spring provided water and concealment. As Nashota prepared their meal, Rosalind sat quietly with her cloth doll, but he could see the worry in her young face. You are thinking of your mother, he observed. What if she's not here? What if that man was wrong, and we came all this way for nothing? Nashota set down the dried meat he was preparing and sat beside her on a flat rock. From his medicine pouch, he withdrew a handful of sacred objects, polished stones, prayer feathers, and small carved figures that had been blessed by medicine men. "Among my people," he said, arranging the objects in a specific pattern on the ground, "we believe that sometimes the spirits speak to us through signs. Watch." He began a soft chant in Apache, his voice blending with the desert wind. As Rosalind watched, mesmerized, one of the eagle feathers began to tremble, then lifted slightly as if touched by an invisible hand. "The feather moves toward the town," Nashota noted with satisfaction. "The spirits guide us toward truth." Whether it was genuine spiritual guidance or simply the desert wind, Rosalind felt comforted by the ceremony. Her faith in Nashota's connection to the spirit world had grown during their travels, reinforced by his uncanny ability to find water, predict weather changes, and sense danger before it appeared. The next morning brought an unexpected opportunity. A Mexican woman appeared at their camp just after sunrise, leading a burro loaded with vegetables and trade goods. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and the weathered hands of someone accustomed to hard work. "Buenos dias," she called out in Spanish, then switched to accented English. "I am Carmen Herrera. I trade in Bitter Creek and saw your smoke last night." Nashota rose slowly, his hand near his knife, but not threatening. "We mean no harm, Senora. We seek only information." Carmen studied them both, the imposing Apache warrior and the small blonde child, and seemed to reach some internal decision. "You seek the yellow-haired woman, no? The one who was taken by Senor Delgado's men?" The confirmation hit them like lightning. Rosalind gasped and started to speak, but Nashota silenced her with a gentle touch. "You know of this woman?" he asked carefully. Carmen nodded gravely. "See, my husband. He works in the mines sometimes. He sees her in the compound where they keep the workers who cannot leave. She translates for the Mexican miners, but she is prisoner, not employee. Is she well? Alive, but frightened. Always frightened. Senor Delgado, he is not a good man. He keeps her because she speaks both languages and because she knows something. He once kept secret." Rosalind could contain herself no longer. "That's my mama. We have to help her." Carmen's expression softened as she looked at the child. "Ay, pobrecita. You are her little daughter, no? She speaks of you often when she thinks no one listens." Tears of joy and relief streamed down Rosalind's face. After weeks of uncertainty, they had confirmation that Victoria was alive and thinking of her. "Where is this compound?" Nashota asked. 2 miles south of town, in the old mining camp. "But it is well guarded, senor. Many men with guns. They do not let anyone in or out without Senor Delgado's permission." Carmen spent the next hour providing detailed information about the layout of Bitter Creek and the mining compound. She drew maps in the dirt, pointed out guard positions, and explained the daily routines of the workers and overseers. Most importantly, she revealed that Delgado himself was expected to leave town in 3 days for business in Mexico City. "When El Patron is away, the guards drink more and pay less attention," she explained. "It might be your best chance." Before leaving, Carmen made an unexpected offer. "My family, we have a small ranch north of here. If you need place to hide after you free the Senora, come to us. We do not love Senor Delgado or his methods." After the trader departed, Nashota and Rosalind spent the day planning their approach. The compound, according to Carmen's description, was built around an old mine shaft, with barracks for workers, offices for supervisors, and a fortified house where Delgado stayed when he was in residence. "Your mother will be kept in the workers' quarters," Nashota reasoned. "Close enough for the guards to watch, but separate from the Mexican families. How will we get her out? Very carefully, and with help from people who want Delgado gone as much as we do." That afternoon, they observed the town from various concealed positions, noting the patterns of movement and the faces of men who might be Delgado's employees. It was during one of these reconnaissance missions that they witnessed something that changed their understanding of the situation entirely. A group of Apache warriors rode into Bitter Creek under a flag of truce, but their reception was anything but friendly. Townspeople scattered into buildings, while armed men took positions behind barricades and in windows. The Apache, led by a war chief Nashota recognized as Cochise's son, rode directly to the largest building in town, what appeared to be Delgado's headquarters. From their hiding place, Nashota and Rosalind watched as harsh words were exchanged. Though they couldn't hear the conversation, the body language of both sides suggested a serious dispute. Finally, the Apache leader threw something at the feet of a well-dressed Mexican man who could only be Delgado himself. "They are angry about something," Nashota murmured, "something that involves the mining operation." When the Apache departed, riding hard toward the south, the town remained tense and nervous. Guards doubled their patrols, and Nashota noticed that several men rode out immediately, heading toward the mining compound. "What do you think that was about?" Rosalind asked. "I think," Nashota replied grimly, "that Senor Delgado has made enemies among my people as well as yours, and that may be the key to freeing your mother." That night, as they prepared to move closer to the compound for detailed surveillance, Nashota performed another ceremony with his sacred objects. This time, the prayer feathers pointed in different directions, as if the spirits themselves were confused about the path ahead. "The signs are mixed," he admitted to Rosalind. "There is great danger ahead, but also great opportunity. Will we succeed?" Nashota looked at the determined little girl who had traveled so far and endured so much, and felt his resolve strengthen. "We will succeed because we must. Your mother waits for us, and we will not fail her." As the desert stars wheeled overhead, an Apache warrior and a white child made their final preparations for a rescue mission that would test every skill they possessed and every bond they had forged. The stakes had never been higher, and the dangers had never been greater, but their love for Victoria Hartwell and for each other burned brighter than any star in the desert sky. The wanted poster appeared overnight, nailed to every telegraph pole and building wall in Bitter Creek. Crudely drawn but unmistakably depicting Nashota's distinctive features, it offered a substantial bounty for the capture of the Apache kidnapper and his stolen child. Carmen discovered it first during her early morning routine of setting up her small market stall. She tore down 3 copies before anyone else noticed, then hurried to the hidden camp where Nashota and Rosalind waited. "Senor, you must see this," she said breathlessly, unfolding the crumpled papers. "Someone has been very busy during the night." Nashota studied the poster grimly. The drawing, while crude, captured enough of his likeness to make identification possible. More troubling was the description underneath, which painted him as a dangerous savage who had murdered several settlers and kidnapped an innocent child. $500, Rosalind read aloud, her reading skills put to grim use. "Dead or alive, that is more money than most of these men see in a year," Carmen observed. "It will bring bounty hunters from 3 territories." Nashota's expression remained calm, but inwardly he cursed himself for underestimating their enemies. Someone with significant resources and influence had orchestrated this manhunt, someone who wanted Rosalind silenced permanently. "We cannot delay," he decided. "Tonight we attempt the rescue, ready or not." Carmen nodded reluctantly. "See, but there is more bad news. My husband returned from the compound this morning. Senor Delgado has moved the yellow-haired woman to his private house. More guards, more walls." The news was devastating. The workers' quarters, while guarded, were relatively accessible. Delgado's personal residence was a fortress, designed to withstand Apache raids and rival mining companies' attacks. "Why did he move her?" Rosalind asked, her voice small with worry. "Because," Carmen replied gently, "he knows someone is looking for her. The bounty hunters, they asked many questions yesterday about Apache seen with white child, about missing women, about people who might pay ransom." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place in Nashota's mind. Delgado wasn't just holding Victoria as a translator, he was using her as bait. The bounty poster, the increased security, the move to his personal compound, it was all designed to draw Nashota and Rosalind into a trap. They want us both, he realized. The mother as leverage, the child as a witness to whatever crime led. To all this. What crime? Rosalind asked. Carmen and her husband had spent the morning gathering information from the Mexican workers who were more willing to trust their own people. The story they pieced together was both complex and damning. Senor Delgado, Carmen explained, he has contract with the American government to provide silver for making coins. But he keeps the best ore for himself and sends inferior metal to the mint. The difference he sells to Mexican buyers at high profit. Stealing from the government, Nashota translated. A serious crime, sigh, but hard to prove without someone who has seen the false records, the secret shipments. Your woman, she worked as bookkeeper in Phoenix. She discovered the theft and tried to report it, so they kidnapped her to keep her quiet. And now they hunt you because you might help her escape and tell the truth, the scope of their enemies. Desperation was now clear. This wasn't just about a missing woman or a kidnapped child. It was about a conspiracy that reached into government offices and mining boardrooms. Men would kill to protect secrets this valuable. That afternoon, while Carmen returned to town to gather more intelligence, Nashota and Rosalind prepared for what might be their final mission together. The Apache warrior checked his weapons carefully. A knife, a tomahawk, and a small pistol he had taken from a dead soldier years ago. I want to help, Rosalind said, watching him oil the gun's mechanism. You will help by staying safe until I return with your mother. No. Her voice carried a firmness that surprised them both. Mama's in there because of me, because someone wants to hurt me and they're using her to get to us. I'm not hiding while you risk your life. Nashota studied her face, seeing determination that reminded him powerfully of Ayala's spirit. His daughter had possessed that same unwillingness to abandon those she loved, even in the face of overwhelming danger. What do you propose, little star? I know something about the compound that Carmen doesn't. Something I saw in Mama's locket. Rosalind carefully removed the hidden photograph from its concealment in her dress and pointed to the background details. See that building behind Mama and the man? It has a special chimney, different from the others. And there's a water tower with marks on it, scratches that look like letters. Nashota examined the tiny photograph more closely. She was right. There were architectural details that might help them navigate the compound in darkness. And, Rosalind continued, if Senor Delgado is using Mama as bait, then he'll expect you to come alone. He won't expect a little girl who can slip through small spaces and hide where grown men can't. The logic was sound, but the risk was enormous. If they failed, both Rosalind and her mother would be at the mercy of men who had already demonstrated their willingness to kill. If we do this together, Nashota said slowly, you must promise to obey my every word without question. One moment of hesitation, one small mistake, could doom us all. I promise. They spent the remaining hours of daylight, planning every detail of their approach. Using Carmen's information and Rosalind's insights from the photograph, they mapped out a route that would take them to the compound after dark, when the guards would be less alert, but the dangers would be multiplied by the darkness. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Carmen returned with final intelligence about guard rotations and the layout of Delgado's house. Her news was mixed. The security was indeed formidable, but there might be allies among the Mexican workers who hated their employer's cruelty. My cousin Rodriguez. He works in the kitchen, she explained. He could leave a door unlocked, create distraction at the right moment. And the risk to him, Carmen's face grew sad. If he is caught helping you, Delgado will have him shot. But Rodriguez lost his own daughter to the mines. Cave-in last year that could have been prevented with proper safety measures. He wants revenge more than safety. As full darkness fell over the desert, Nashota performed one final ceremony with his sacred objects. This time, the prayer feathers pointed steadily toward the south, toward the compound where Victoria Hartwell waited in captivity. "The spirits have decided," he announced. "Tonight, we reclaim what was stolen from us." Rosalind touched the turquoise and silver necklace he had made for her, feeling the weight of Ayala's cross against her chest. "Will your daughter's spirit help us? She is already helping us. She brought us together, guided us this far. Tonight, she will watch over all three of her family members." As they prepared Thunderwalker for the ride to destiny, neither the Apache warrior nor the determined little girl spoke of their fears. Instead, they focused on their love for the woman who connected them and their determination to restore their unconventional family. The desert wind carried the sound of distant machinery and the smell of smoke from Bitter Creek's mills. Somewhere in that maze of greed and violence, Victoria Hartwell waited for rescue. Tonight, rescue was coming, carried on the wings of an unlikely alliance between cultures, generations, and hearts that refused to accept defeat. The blood-stained shawl arrived at dawn, delivered by a grinning bounty hunter who clearly expected to collect his reward immediately. Rosalind recognized it instantly, the soft blue wool with tiny white flowers that her mother had worn on special occasions, now torn and stained with what appeared to be dried blood. "Found this about 10 miles south," the hunter announced to the small crowd that had gathered around Carmen's market stall, "along with signs of a struggle and a shallow grave. Looks like your yellow-haired woman finally tried to run and got herself killed for the trouble." Rosalind's legs gave out beneath her. If not for Nashota's quick reflexes, she would have collapsed completely. The shawl, her mother's favorite shawl, seemed to mock them from the bounty hunter's filthy hands. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, it's not true." Carmen, who had been translating quietly for her Mexican customers, crossed herself and murmured a prayer. Even she seemed convinced by the grisly evidence. "Where exactly did you find this?" Carmen asked the hunter, her voice carefully neutral. "Dead Horse Canyon, about a half-day's ride south. Grave was fresh, maybe 3 days old. Ground was soft enough to see where someone dragged a body." The hunter's description was detailed and convincing. He spoke of buzzards circling, of disturbed earth that suggested hasty burial, of scraps of clothing that matched the shawl. To any reasonable person, the evidence would be overwhelming. But Nashota was not entirely reasonable, and his years of survival had taught him to trust his instincts over apparent facts. Something about the hunter's story felt wrong. Too neat, too convenient, too eager to close a story that powerful men wanted ended. "Did you dig up the grave?" Nashota asked quietly, his hand resting protectively on Rosalind's shoulder. The hunter's eyes shifted slightly. "Didn't need to. Smell was enough to tell me what was down there." "And you left the body unburied? In Apache territory?" "Ain't my job to bury every dead person I come across, Redskin." Nashota's spiritual training had taught him to read people's souls through their words and actions. This man was lying, not about finding the shawl, but about what it meant. The bloodstain was real, but the grave was fiction. "Show me," Nashota demanded. "What?" "Show me this grave. Take us there." The hunter's confident expression faltered. "Now, see here, Apache, I ain't running a sightseeing tour. I found evidence, I reported it, and now I want my reward money." "There is no reward for finding a dead woman," Carmen pointed out. "The bounty is for a living child and her captor." "Well, then maybe I'll just have to claim that bounty too," the hunter said, his hand moving toward his gun. "Seeing as how I've got both of them right here." The threat hung in the air like desert heat. Several townspeople had gathered to watch the confrontation, their faces showing the mixture of curiosity and bloodlust that came with any promise of violence. But before the situation could escalate, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "There will be no killing in my street," declared Carmen's husband, Rodriguez, as he emerged from the shadows between buildings. Behind him came 5 other Mexican men, all armed and all wearing expressions of grim determination. The bounty hunter found himself outnumbered and in foreign territory. After a moment of indecision, he spat in the dust and remounted his horse. "This ain't over, Apache. That bounty's good anywhere in the territory, and there's plenty of men willing to collect." Yet after the hunter rode away, Rodriguez approached Nashota with urgent news. "Senor, you must listen carefully. The woman, she is not dead." Rosalind's head snapped up, hope blazing in her tear-filled eyes. "You are certain?" Nashota asked. "See, my cousin works in Delgado's kitchen. Last night, very late, he saw them. Bring the senora from her room to the main house. She was alive but wounded, blood on her arm from where they cut her to stain the shawl." The full scope of the deception became clear. Delgado and his men had staged Victoria's death to end the search for her, using her own blood to make the evidence convincing. But they needed her alive to continue exploiting her knowledge and skills. "Why the deception?" Nashota asked. Rodriguez's expression darkened. "Because yesterday 2 Apache war parties came to town. They demanded the return of stolen tribal artifacts that Delgado's men took from burial sites. When he refused, they promised war if the sacred objects are not returned within 7 days. And Delgado believes that with the woman supposedly dead, no one will interfere with his plans to flee the territory." "Exactly. He loads wagons tonight with silver, sacred objects, and the senora. Tomorrow at dawn, he runs for Mexico." The revelation transformed everything. They were no longer planning a rescue mission. They were planning an intercept of a fleeing criminal and his prisoners. "Where will he travel?" Nashota asked. "The old smuggler's route through Devil's Canyon. Only one way in or out, easy to defend against pursuit." Nashota knew the terrain Rodriguez described. Devil's Canyon was a narrow passage through the mountains that connected Arizona territory to the Mexican state of Sonora. It was indeed defensible, but that also meant that anyone trapped inside would have nowhere to run. "How many men will he take?" "Perhaps 20, all well-armed, all desperate. They know if they are caught, they will hang for murder and theft." As the gravity of their situation became clear, Rosalind surprised them all by standing up straighter and wiping the tears from her eyes. "Then we'll stop them," she said with quiet determination. "All of them." Rodriguez stared at the small girl in amazement. "Niña, these are dangerous men. And my mama is with them," Rosalind interrupted. "She's hurt and scared and thinking no one is coming to help her. But she's wrong. We are coming." Nashota felt a surge of fierce pride in his adopted daughter. In her moment of deepest despair, when faced with apparent proof of her mother's death, she had found strength instead of surrender. "The child is right," he said simply. "We will stop them." "But how?" Carmen asked. 20 armed men against 1 Apache and a little girl." "Not just us," Nashota replied, his eyes taking on a calculating gleam. "You said 2 Apache war parties came to town yesterday." Rodriguez nodded. "See, but they rode south after Delgado, refused their demands. Then they are already moving to intercept his escape route. My people do not make idle threats about sacred objects." The plan that began forming in Nashota's mind was audacious and dangerous, but it offered their best. Hope of success. If they could reach the Apache war parties and convince them that their goals aligned, they might have the numbers needed to stop Delgado's convoy. "There is something else," Rodriguez added reluctantly. "The bounty hunters. More come every day. Word spreads fast about $500. By tomorrow, there may be dozens of them in the territory. Let them come," Nashota said grimly. "Tonight we end this, one way or another." As they prepared to leave Bitter Creek, Carmen pressed a small wrapped bundle into Rosalind's hands. "Food. For the journey, Niña. And this," she placed a small wooden cross in Rosalind's palm. "It belonged to my own daughter, who died of fever 2 summers ago. She would want you to have it, I think." Rosalind accepted the gift solemnly, understanding the significance of the gesture. Like Nashota's medicine pouch and Ayala's cross, this was a connection to a lost child, a parent's love made tangible. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll take good care of it." As Thunderwalker carried them away from the mining town for what might be the last time, Rosalind clutched her mother's blood-stained shawl in one hand and Carmen's daughter's cross in the other. The shawl represented deception and cruelty, but also hope, because if her mother's enemies had gone to such lengths to fake her death, it meant she was still alive. The cross represented something deeper, the universal love that connected all, parents and children, regardless of race or language or circumstances. Behind them, Bitter Creek continued its grimy business of extracting wealth from the earth. Ahead lay Devil's Canyon and a confrontation that would determine the fate of their unlikely family. But for the first time since the bounty hunter had displayed that terrible shawl, Rosalind felt hope burning bright in her chest. Her mother was alive, Nashota was with her, and somewhere in the desert ahead, help was waiting in the form of Apache warriors who had their own reasons to stop Joaquin Delgado. The final phase of their journey was about to begin, and this time they would not be facing their enemies alone. The war paint went on in ancient patterns, each line and symbol carrying meaning passed down through generations of Apache warriors. Nashota's weathered hands moved with ceremonial precision as he applied the sacred pigments to his face, transforming himself from peaceful exile to instrument of war, red ochre for courage, white clay for spiritual protection, black charcoal for death to his enemies. Rosalind watched in fascination and growing concern as the man she had come to think of as her gentle protector prepared for battle. This was a side of Nashota she had never seen, the war leader who had once struck fear into the hearts of soldiers and settlers across the territory. "Will it hurt?" she asked quietly as he painted the final symbols. "The paint?" Nashota glanced at her with eyes that seemed older and more distant than usual. "No, little star, the paint protects. It is what comes after that may hurt." They had been riding hard for 6 hours, following ancient Apache trails through terrain that would challenge even experienced desert travelers. Thunderwalker seemed to sense the urgency of their mission, his powerful legs covering ground with a pace that ate up the miles between them and Devil's Canyon. The landscape around them had grown increasingly desolate as they moved south toward the border country. This was land that belonged neither to Mexico nor the United States in any meaningful sense, a wild region where only the strongest survived and the law was written in gun smoke and blood. It was here, in a hidden valley where a small spring created a temporary oasis, that they found the Apache war party. 20 warriors sat around small fires, their horses picketed nearby, their weapons cleaned and ready. These were not reservation Apache, beaten down by government rations and missionary schools. These were free men who had chosen the old ways over surrender, led by chiefs who remembered when their people ruled the desert without interference. The leader rose as Nashota and Rosalind approached. He was a man of perhaps 40 years, his face marked by ritual scars and his body bearing the lean, hard muscle of a lifelong warrior. When he spoke, it was in rapid Apache that left Rosalind completely lost. But she could read the body language, and what she saw was not entirely encouraging. Hands moved toward weapons. Voices rose in what sounded like argument. Several warriors gestured angrily toward her, and she caught the word white repeated several times. Finally, Nashota raised his hand for silence and spoke in English so that Rosalind could understand. "I am Nashota, son of Thunderbear, war leader of the Chiricahua before the time of surrender. This child is my daughter by choice, and her mother has been stolen by the man who also stole your sacred objects." The war leader, who had introduced himself as Cochise's nephew Geronimo, studied them both with calculating eyes. "You ask us to risk our lives for a white woman and her child. I ask you to take what is already yours. The sacred burial goods that Delgado stole from your ancestors' graves. The woman is simply additional justice. And if we help you, what do we gain beyond the return of stolen artifacts?" Nashota had anticipated this question during their long ride. His answer came. Without hesitation, Delgado carries enough silver to buy weapons for 100 warriors, government silver stolen from federal shipments. With such resources, your people could resist reservation life for years. A murmur of interest passed through the gathered warriors. This was language they understood, practical advantage combined with spiritual obligation. "Show us proof of what you claim," Geronimo demanded. Nashota reached into his medicine pouch and withdrew a small object wrapped in soft leather. When he unwrapped it, the warriors gasped collectively. It was a turquoise and silver bracelet of exquisite workmanship, decorated with symbols that marked it as coming from a chief's burial. Delgado gave this to a Mexican woman in payment for her silence. She gave it to me when she learned its true nature. Geronimo took the bracelet reverently, his fingers tracing the sacred symbols. This belonged to many horses, a chief of our grandfather's time. It should lie with his bones in the sacred cave, not decorate the wrist of some Mexican whore. The sight of their stolen heritage in the hands of grave robbers seemed to decide the matter. Harsh words were exchanged in Apache, plans were made, and by full darkness, an unlikely alliance had been forged. The plan they developed was complex but necessary, given the challenges they faced. Delgado's convoy would travel through Devil's Canyon just before dawn, when the light was poor, but visibility was adequate for navigation. The canyon itself was narrow, with high walls that would prevent escape, but also limit attack angles. "We divide into 3 groups," Geronimo explained, drawing maps in the dirt with his knife. "The first group blocks the southern exit with fallen rocks. The second group attacks from the northern entrance, driving them deeper into the trap. The third group, the smallest, waits in the hidden cave halfway through the canyon." "Which group do we join?" Rosalind asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "You join no group, little warrior," Geronimo replied with a slight smile. "You wait here, safe and hidden, until the fighting is over." "No." The word came out more forcefully than Rosalind had intended, surprising even herself. "My mama is in that convoy. I'm not sitting here while other people risk their lives to save her." Geronimo looked to Nashota, clearly expecting him to control his daughter, but Nashota's response surprised them both. "She has earned the right to speak," he said simply, "and to choose. She is a child, she is my family, and in my family we do not abandon each other when trouble comes." The debate that followed was conducted entirely in Apache, with voices raised in heated argument. Rosalind couldn't understand the words, but she recognized the universal sounds of adults trying to decide a child's fate without consulting the child herself. Finally, an old warrior who had been silent throughout the planning session spoke up. His words were measured and carried the weight of years and wisdom. "What does the elder say?" Nashota asked, translating for Rosalind. "He says that children who have seen what this one has seen are no longer truly children. He says that the spirits sometimes speak through small voices when large voices have grown deaf." Geronimo considered this, then looked directly at Rosalind. "If you come with us, you follow orders without question. One mistake could doom us all." "I understand. You stay with Nashota at all times. You do nothing that has not been planned in advance." "Yes. And if we tell you to hide, you hide. If we tell you to run, you run." Rosalind met his gaze steadily. "I promise." The old warrior nodded approvingly and said something else in Apache that made several of the younger men smile. "What did he say?" Rosalind asked. "He said that courage comes in all sizes and that the spirits favor those who protect their family above those who protect only themselves." As the night progressed, the final preparations took on an almost ritualistic quality. Weapons were blessed by medicine men. Prayers were offered to ancestors and spirits. Paint was applied in patterns that told stories of each warrior's deeds and dreams. Nashota performed his own ceremonies, but with a difference. Instead of preparing for battle alone, he included Rosalind in rituals that had never before included. A white child, This paint will make you harder to see in the shadows, he explained as he applied careful designs to her face. These symbols will ask the spirits of your ancestors to watch over you. But I don't know who my ancestors were. Then we will ask Ayala to speak for them. She knows all the spirits now, and she loves you as family. The paint felt cool and strange on Rosalind's skin, but she held still as Nashota worked. When he finished, she looked into his eyes and saw not just determination, but peace. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Yes. Fear keeps a warrior alert and alive. But I am not afraid of dying, if that is what you mean. I am only afraid of failing you and your mother. You won't fail us. How can you be so certain?" Rosalind touched the turquoise necklace he had made for her, feeling Ayala's cross warm against her skin. "Because she's with us, I can feel her. She won't let anything happen to her family." As the stars wheeled overhead toward dawn, the Apache war party made their final preparations. Horses were saddled, weapons checked one last time, and final. Prayers offered to the spirits of war and protection. In a few hours, they would face their enemies in Devil's Canyon. The outcome would determine not just the fate of Victoria Hartwell, but the future of an unlikely family that had formed across cultural divides and been strengthened by shared trials. Nashota looked at the small girl who had ridden beside him. Through so many dangers, her face now marked with war paint like a true Apache warrior. In her eyes, he saw the same fearless determination that had once shone in Ayala's gaze. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and that was enough to give them strength for the battle ahead. The desert wind carried the scent of sage, and the distant promise of violence. Soon, the sun would rise on Devil's Canyon, and with it would come the final test of their bond as family and their commitment to justice. They were as ready as courage, love, and careful planning could make. Them, the wooden whistle's sharp trill cut through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade, signaling that Delgado's convoy had entered Devil's Canyon right on schedule. Nashota had carved the whistle from mountain mahogany during their wait. Its design, based on traditional Apache bird calls that could carry for miles without sounding like human communication. From their concealed position halfway up the canyon wall, Nashota and Rosalind watched the procession below. 20 armed riders surrounded 3 heavily loaded wagons, with Joaquin Delgado himself riding at the center of the formation on a magnificent black stallion. Even from a distance, his expensive clothes and arrogant posture marked him as a man accustomed to taking whatever he wanted. "Do you see, Mama?" Rosalind whispered, her voice barely audible despite their hidden position. Nashota studied the wagons through the gray morning light. The first 2 carried wooden crates that presumably held the stolen silver and sacred artifacts. But the third wagon was different, covered with canvas and guarded more closely than the others. "There," he pointed to a flash of yellow hair visible through a gap in the canvas. "Third wagon near the front." Relief flooded through Rosalind at the confirmation that her mother was alive, but that relief was quickly tempered by the sight of chains visible around Victoria's wrists. Even at this distance, it was clear that she was more prisoner than passenger. The convoy moved slowly through the narrow canyon, their horses' hooves echoing off the stone walls. Delgado's men were alert, but not overly concerned. This was their territory, their escape route, and they had used it successfully many times before. They had no way of knowing that Apache warriors were already in position at both ends of the canyon, waiting for the signal to spring their trap. Nashota raised his whistle to his lips again, producing a different call. The cry of a red-tailed hawk that would tell Geronimo's warriors that the convoy was in the optimal position for attack. The response came almost immediately, but not in the form they had expected. A rifle shot rang out from the southern end of the canyon, followed by shouts and the sound of galloping horses. But instead of the coordinated Apache attack they had planned, chaos erupted as a different group of riders poured into the canyon from behind the convoy. "Bounty hunters!" Nashota cursed, recognizing the disorganized but aggressive tactics of men motivated by reward money rather than military precision. The unexpected arrival of a third party threw everyone's plans into disarray. Delgado's men wheeled their horses around, caught between two hostile forces. The Apache warriors at the south end of the canyon found themselves fighting bounty hunters instead of Delgado's guards. And in the middle of it all, the precious wagons, including the one carrying Victoria, were suddenly vulnerable to crossfire from multiple directions. "We have to go now," Nashota decided, abandoning their planned timeline. "Before your mother gets caught in the shooting." They rappelled down the canyon wall using ropes Nashota had positioned during the night, moving with desperate speed as the battle intensified below them. The sound of gunfire echoed off the stone walls, making it impossible to determine who was shooting at whom. When they reached the canyon floor, they found themselves behind the wagon train, which had become the center of a three-way battle. Delgado's men were fighting both the Apache and the bounty hunters, while the two attacking forces seemed to be shooting at each other as much as at their intended targets. "Stay close and stay low," Nashota instructed as they moved toward Victoria's wagon. "Use the rocks for cover, and remember," he never finished the sentence. A bounty hunter on horseback spotted them and wheeled around, his rifle raised to claim his prize. But before he could fire, one of Geronimo's warriors put an arrow through his chest, sending him tumbling from his saddle. The canyon was a maze of dust, gun smoke, and screaming horses. Men fought and died in confused melees, where it was often impossible to tell friend from enemy. Through it all, the wagons remained the center of attention, with each faction trying to secure what they considered their rightful prize. Nashota and Rosalind reached the covered wagon just as Victoria spotted them through the canvas. Her eyes went wide with a mixture of hope and terror. Hope that rescue had finally come, terror that her daughter was in such danger. "Mama!" Rosalind called out, tears streaming down her paint-marked face. But their reunion was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Joaquin Delgado himself was riding toward them, his face twisted with rage and his pistol drawn. "So," he shouted over the noise of battle, "the Apache kidnapper finally shows himself, and he's brought my property with him." Nashota stepped protectively in front of Rosalind, his own weapons ready. "The child belongs to no one but her mother. The child belongs to whoever can keep her alive," Delgado snarled. "And right now, that's me." The confrontation that had been building for weeks was finally at hand. Around them, the battle raged between Apache warriors, bounty hunters, and Delgado's remaining men. But for this moment, everything focused down to two men, a frightened child and a captive woman, who represented the key to multiple fortunes. The wooden whistle lay forgotten in the dust, its job done. Now only courage, skill, and perhaps divine intervention would determine who walked away from Devil's Canyon alive. The family photograph would be taken 3 months later, but in this moment of supreme danger, Victoria Hartwell could see it clearly in her mind. Her daughter, herself, and the Apache warrior who had saved them both, standing together as the unlikely family they had become. "Get away from them," Victoria shouted from inside the wagon, her voice hoarse from weeks of captivity, but still carrying a mother's fierce authority. Delgado's laugh was cruel and humorless. "Senora, you are hardly in a position to make demands. Your daughter and her savage protector have walked into my trap quite willingly." But even as he spoke, Delgado's confidence was being eroded by the chaos around them. His carefully planned escape was disintegrating into a battlefield where his men were being cut down by Apache warriors and bounty hunters alike. The silver that was supposed to buy his freedom in Mexico was scattered across the canyon floor as damaged wagons spilled their contents. Nashota circled slowly, keeping himself between Delgado and Rosalind, his tomahawk in one hand and knife in the other. Years of warfare had taught him to read an opponent's intentions in their posture and breathing. Delgado was desperate, which made him dangerous, but also prone to mistakes. "You have what you came for," Nashota said calmly. "The "Woman, the silver, the sacred objects, take them and go. Leave the child. The child is evidence, Apache." She saw her mother's records, heard conversations she shouldn't have heard. "As long as she lives, she's a threat to everything I've built." The admission sent ice through Rosalind's veins. This man, this monster, had been planning to kill her all along. Her mother's kidnapping, the fake death, the bounty hunters, it had all been designed to eliminate a 6-year-old witness to his crimes. But instead of paralyzing her with fear, the knowledge filled Rosalind with cold fury. This was the man who had taken her mother, terrorized them both, and turned their lives into a nightmare of hiding and running. "You're the one who hurt Mama," she said, her young voice carrying surprising steadiness. "You made her bleed for that." "Fake grave." Delgado's eyes glittered with malice. "Clever little girl. Yes, I cut her just enough to make the blood convincing. She screamed quite nicely, I thought. The taunt was intended to break Rosalind's spirit, but it had the opposite effect. Stepping slightly away from Nashota's protection, she reached into her dress and withdrew the locket that had started their entire quest. "You want to know what else I saw?" she asked, holding the locket where Delgado could see it clearly. "I saw this. Every face, every detail, every piece of evidence Mama hid before you took her." Delgado's expression changed as he recognized the significance of the small silver locket. "Give me that." "No." The simple refusal, delivered with absolute conviction, by a child who had traveled hundreds of miles through desert and danger, seemed to infuriate Delgado beyond reason. He raised his pistol, aiming directly at Rosalind. "Give me that locket or I'll kill you where you stand." It was Victoria who provided the distraction that saved her daughter's life. With strength born of desperation, she managed to rock the wagon violently enough to throw off Delgado's aim. His shot went wide, chipping stone from the canyon wall behind them. In that instant of confusion, Nashota struck. His tomahawk caught Delgado's gun hand, sending the pistol spinning away into the dust. Before the man could recover, Nashota was on him, and they crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. The fight was brutal and personal. Delgado fought like a cornered animal, pulling a knife from his boot and slashing wildly at Nashota's face and arms. But the Apache warrior had decades of combat experience, and his rage was righteous, where Delgado's was merely selfish. "This is for the children you would have orphaned," Nashota growled as he disarmed his opponent. "This is for the sacred objects you defiled. This is for the pain you caused my family." Around them, the larger battle was winding down. Geronimo's warriors had gained the upper hand against both Delgado's men and the bounty hunters, though the cost had been high. Bodies lay scattered across the canyon floor, and the desert sand was dark with blood. But Rosalind's attention was focused entirely on freeing her mother. Using the knife Nashota had taught her to carry, she cut through the ropes that held the wagon's canvas cover, then climbed inside to where Victoria lay chained and exhausted. "Mama," she whispered, throwing her arms around her mother's neck. "I found you. We found you." Victoria's tears came in great, shuddering sobs as she held her daughter close. "My brave girl, my precious, brave girl, where did you—" "Nashota, help me," Rosalind explained, working at the locks on her mother's chains, with tools the Apache had taught her to use. "He's my father now, too. We're a family." The words hung in the air between them, a declaration that would have seemed impossible just months ago. But as Victoria looked through the wagon's opening and saw the Apache warrior who had risked everything to reunite them, she understood that some families are formed by choice and circumstance rather than blood. When the chains finally fell away, and Victoria could hold her daughter freely, they both turned to see Nashota standing over Delgado's unconscious form, his weapons lowered but ready. "It is finished," he said simply, and in the growing light of dawn in Devil's Canyon, with the sound of victory cries echoing off the stone walls, a most unusual family was finally truly reunited. 6 months had passed since the battle at Devil's Canyon, and the foundation stones of their new home gleamed white in the afternoon sun. Each member of their unusual family had chosen stones from different places. Rosalind from the creek near Nashota's former canyon sanctuary, Victoria from the ruins of the old mining camp where she had been imprisoned, and Nashota from the sacred mountain where his people had once held their most important ceremonies. Together, these stones formed the cornerstone of a house that stood precisely at the boundary between Apache land and settler territory, a physical representation of the bridge their family had built between two worlds. "Hand me that level little star," Nashota called out as he adjusted another stone in the foundation they were laying together. Rosalind, now 7 years old and fluent in both English and Apache, scrambled over with the requested tool. Her blonde hair was braided with leather cords in the traditional Apache style, but she wore a dress her mother had sewn from blue calico. Like the house they were building, she embodied the blending of cultures that had made their family possible. Victoria looked up from the vegetable garden she was planting nearby, soil under her fingernails and satisfaction in her eyes. The ordeal of her captivity had left marks. She startled at unexpected sounds and sometimes woke from nightmares, but the months of healing with her family had restored her strength and spirit. "The corn is coming up beautifully," she observed, wiping her hands on her apron, "and I think the beans will be ready for harvest before the first frost." The garden itself told the story of their blended life. Traditional Apache crops like corn, beans and squash grew alongside vegetables Victoria remembered from her childhood in Ohio, tomatoes, carrots and herbs for seasoning. Nashota had taught them which wild plants could supplement their cultivated food, while Victoria contributed her knowledge of preserving and storing food for the lean winter months. Their home was becoming known throughout the region as a place where travelers of all backgrounds could find rest and fair treatment. Apache warriors stopped to water their horses and share news from the reservation. Mexican traders paused to replenish supplies and trade for Victoria's excellent preserves. Even some white settlers, despite their initial suspicions, had come to respect the family's hospitality and Nashota's knowledge of desert survival. The legal resolution of Delgado's crimes had taken months of testimony and investigation. Victoria's evidence, combined with the recovered stolen artifacts and silver, had been more than sufficient to convict the mining boss and his surviving associates. The territorial authorities, embarrassed by how close the conspiracy had come to succeeding, had been grateful enough to grant Victoria a substantial reward and officially recognize Nashota's guardianship of Rosalind. The adoption papers came through last week, Victoria had told Nashota one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "You're legally her father now, in the eyes of the law as well as in our hearts." Nashota had nodded solemnly, understanding the significance. "And you approve?" "I more than approve. I can't imagine a better father for her, or a better partner for this family." The conversation had been carefully respectful, acknowledging the unusual nature of their relationship. Victoria and Nashota had become partners in every sense except the romantic, bound together by their shared love for Rosalind and their mutual respect, but maintaining separate sleeping quarters and the comfortable boundaries of deep friendship. Rather than marriage, it worked because it was based on choice and understanding rather than societal expectations. Victoria had her independence and her daughter's love. Nashota had found his purpose and healed his wounded heart. Rosalind had two parents who would die to protect her and teach her everything they knew about surviving and thriving in a challenging world. Their closest neighbors were Carmen and Rodriguez Herrera, whose ranch lay 5 miles to the east. The Mexican family had become true friends, often sharing meals and helping with major projects like the house construction. Rodriguez had proven invaluable in teaching Nashota European building techniques, while Carmen and Victoria had formed a partnership trading preserved foods and handmade goods with merchant caravans. "Senor Nashota," Rodriguez had said just last week, "you have created something remarkable here, a place where people can be themselves without apology, where different ways of living support each other instead of fighting." Today, as they worked. Together on the final sections of their foundation, that vision was becoming solid reality. The house they were building would be large enough for their growing needs, but simple enough to maintain with their own hands. It featured traditional Apache architectural elements like thick adobe walls for insulation, along with European innovations like glass windows and a stone fireplace. Thunder Walker grazed contentedly in a fenced pasture nearby, no longer the only horse on their property. They had acquired 2 mares and a gelding, enough animals to handle their transportation needs and perhaps start a small breeding program. Nashota had also built a chicken coop, and Victoria's small flock provided eggs and occasional meat to supplement their diet. The afternoon was growing late when they heard the sound of approaching riders. All 3 family members looked up alertly. Their experiences had taught them to be cautious about unexpected visitors, but these were riders they recognized. Mayor Webb from Cedar Falls rode in the lead, accompanied by Dr. Thornton and 3 other men Rosalind didn't immediately recognize. Their posture was formal but not hostile, suggesting official business rather than trouble. "Good afternoon," Webb called out as the group approached. "Hope we're not disturbing your work." "You are welcome," Nashota replied, setting down his tools and walking forward to greet them properly. Webb dismounted and extended his hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "Nashota, Mrs. Hartwell, Miss Rosalind, we come bearing news we thought you'd want to hear in person." "Good news, I hope," Victoria said, wiping her hands clean as she joined them. Dr. Thornton smiled broadly. "The best. The territorial governor has officially commended your family for your role in exposing the silver theft conspiracy. There's to be a ceremony in Phoenix next month with medals and recognition. More importantly," added one of the men Rosalind didn't know, "the recovery of those stolen Apache artifacts has helped establish a new treaty with several tribal bands. The governor credits your family's example of cooperation between cultures as inspiration for the negotiations." Nashota received this news with his characteristic calm, but Victoria could see the pride in his eyes. Recognition from the territorial government meant safety for their family and validation of the path they had chosen. "There's something else," Webb continued. "The town of Cedar Falls would like to formally apologize for our initial treatment of your family. We're also hoping you might consider serving as liaison between the Apache bands and the territorial government. Your unique position and proven wisdom could help prevent future conflicts." The offer was both an honor and a responsibility. Nashota considered it carefully before responding. "I will think on this. Such work is important, but my first duty is to my family." "Of course," Webb agreed. "Take all the time you need." As the official party prepared to leave, Rosalind surprised them all by stepping forward. "Mr. Webb," she said with the formal politeness her mother had taught her, "I want you to know that we forgive you, all of you. People make mistakes when they're scared, but what matters is that you learned from them." The simple declaration, delivered with the profound wisdom that some children possess, brought tears to the eyes of several hardened frontier officials. After the visitors departed, the 3 family members stood together watching the sun set. Behind the mountains that had sheltered them through so many trials, the foundation stones beneath their feet were solid and true, ready to support whatever future they would build together. "Are you happy, little star?" Nashota asked, his arm around Rosalind's shoulders. "I'm home," she replied, and in those 2 words was all the answer anyone needed. Victoria smiled and took Nashota's other hand in hers, a gesture of friendship and partnership that acknowledged their unconventional but deeply loving family structure. Tomorrow, they would continue building their house, tending their garden, and creating a life that honored both their individual heritage and their shared future. There would be challenges ahead. There always were, but they would face them together as a family formed not by blood, but by choice, not by tradition, but by love. The desert wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying with it the promise of seasons to come and the certainty that some bonds, once formed in the crucible of shared hardship, can never be broken. In the growing darkness, three very different people had found